Many luxury cars carry engines that are technologically advanced, powerful, efficient, and fun to drive. Unfortunately, many modern day luxury cars carry engines that are absolutely brutal. They burn oil, they catastrophically fail, and I'm gonna help you avoid gray hairs, getting on your service manager's Christmas mailing list, and keep more money in your wallet. So here's a list of 5 of the worst luxury car engines and the vehicles you'll find them in. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
The first luxury car vehicle engine that makes the radar for some of the most unreliable and problematic engines that you can possibly find are what's under the hood of this big, beautiful vehicle. Well, what we're looking at here is a Lexus. As you can see, we have the Lexus logo there, and we're dealing with this beautiful script, the LX600. Yes, this big, bold SUV. And this Lexus here also carries the same engine under the hood, and that is called the V35A FTS. And while a lot of people got excited about that new LX600, we're looking at this big, beautiful GX model here, big laser cut rims, nice detailing on the side, all kinds of new technology, running boards, and this is the latest and greatest revamped model of the Lexus GX 550. These are absolutely gorgeous. They look a lot like a Land Rover Defender with the implied and expressed reliability that you get from the Lexus brand right there. But unfortunately, this pains me to say this because Toyota and Lexus are struggling with this engine because also Toyota Sequoia and the Tundra carry that same drivetrain. Well, it's a 3.4 liter twin turbo V6 now that they've gone ahead and replaced some of their outgoing naturally aspirated V8 engines like you found with the 4.6, 4.7, as well as the 5.7 V8 have now all been replaced in the new updated versions of these respective models with this new twin turbo V6, and it's had some problems. But sadly, after hundreds of different failures and potential failures and teardowns, it's been concluded that there have in fact been engines that have catastrophically failed, shut down, and customers are left in a lurch, leaving their big, beautiful, brand new SUV by Lexus over at the dealership lot, not sure what to do with it. And initially it was alleged by Toyota Lexus that it was a small batch of failures. Now we're seeing them in a couple of different model years, 23s and 24s. So it's clearly more widespread. And initially they are also saying that after months of searching and researching and trying to figure out what the issue was, Toyota also alleged that it had to do with excess debris in the case of the engine that would circle around after you put oil in it. It drove into service for a short while, and then that metal particulate in that engine would wind up in the main bearings. That's the crankshaft that turns reciprocating mass. The main bearings on the end would lock up because you get material and metal particulate in there, and it would cause a premature failure. There appears to be a lot more issues assigned to what Toyota is actually letting on, and some of the findings so far that have been popping out of some of these investigations have been related to some of those bearing materials getting hung up and causing hot spots and failures. But also, as I search here, there seems to be more issues. Some responses were improving the fuel quality. We know turbocharged engines often need a much higher octane because once you're running under boost, they require that to prevent detonation. And some were alleging that there was an inadequate design for the oiling to the bearing, and they ultimately went dry, causing premature failure. Some people were also saying that it had to do with the wrong viscosity or the wrong weight of oil that were leading to some of these failures. And there was even others that were alleging that you needed to drop your oil service interval down to 5,000 miles from 10,000 miles. Whatever the problem was, there seems to be an ongoing issue, whether it's particulate, whether it's weight of oil, or whether it's just a bad design flaw. See, right here's another unfortunate candidate. Right here we have an LX600. Here's the full-size SUV that carries that 3.4 liter twin turbo V6. And what's going on under here? Well, look, it's supposed to be an engine in there, but there's no engine. It's all covered up because that engine is missing. It's a sad state of affairs, but this is how a lot of them are going into the shop with the engines getting yanked. I do trust that Lexus and Toyota will eventually get that right, but until that time, I can't, in my best judgment, offer up and give it a recommendation to each and every one of you as you're spending your hard-earned dollars on great expensive new vehicles. And I don't want to be a guinea pig, and neither should you be a guinea pig by buying a vehicle with engines that aren't sorted out. You definitely want to avoid this one like the plague. Another seriously one of the worst luxury car engines you'll ever find anywhere, anytime, and it speaks closely to me because I personally owned one. I can attest, and I thought, oh, all the rhetoric, all the noise on the internet, it was all false nonsense. I'll get myself a low mile one, and I found myself a 60,000 mile car that had all the maintenance and a few small updates, and it was as bad. No, wait a minute, it was worse than they even say on the forums. And what we're looking at here is a 2007 to 2010 BMW E90, E92 generation with the N54. That's right, that's the twin turbo 3-liter 6-cylinder engine under the hood. And you can tell this one here is not, but you can tell basically the giveaway, if this one's not badged, usually had a tailpipe on either side like that. And while the drivetrain was fun, it was rear-wheel drive, or you can get X-Drive, all-wheel drive, you can get automatic. Mine was a 6-speed manual with a rear-wheel drive. It was an absolutely beautiful vehicle in theory, until I owned it and I realized every second week the hood was up because I was fixing a coolant leak, an oil leak, something catastrophically failed. There was a check engine light almost every single day. And it is true what they say, that is a seriously problematic vehicle. Sure, you have a water pump. I had to replace that with a thermostat. They're bolted together underneath. You have to get the car up, take all the bottom pieces off, and it's an 8-hour job to replace an oil pump and thermostat. Well, at least it's digital, it's electronic, so it's easy to bleed to the system because all you do is you turn it on, turn the key, and it circulates by itself. You don't actually have to bubble it over the top. That's about the only thing good about it, because all the cooling system lines crack, leak. I had coolant leaks every single week. The accessory belt can go off the rails and actually get hung up and get pulled in and destroy the front end of the engine. Right up front here, there was an oil filter housing and a cooler, and there's 2 sets of gaskets. And to get at that, which I had to replace mine, you basically have to rip apart the top end of the bulkhead, cross bracing, the intake manifold, because there was one bolt that fastened that down. It was another 8-hour job just to replace a couple of O-rings on top of the engine. More issues on this side because you had the 2 turbos on this side. The wastegates would start to rattle and hum. When you turn the ignition off, you get a rattling noise. Of course, there was other issues with coolant leaks because of all of the hoses on top. I had to even seal my intake because you start developing boost leaks or vacuum leaks, and that's usually one of the areas. The 6 individual intake manifold runner O-rings all have to be replaced because they dry out from all the excess heat and all the turbocharging heat that instills other issues. Plastics start to melt down. The engine is a problem from top to bottom. And it wasn't until recently with the new B58 engine that they finally figured out half the issues, because the piezo injectors were problematic too, and they no longer use those. So the entire engine was really a breakthrough try for BMW, and unfortunately vehicles like the 3 Series, 5 Series vehicles carried that N54 engine. And another one, I can't tell you and warn you enough, you need to avoid it. Another one of the biggest heat modern day engines exists in vehicles like this modern day Audi A5, Audi A4, as well as a Q5 like this, carry the same engine, and it's a real problem. 126,000 vehicles were affected with excessive oil consumption. That's right, I call it Audi's patented oil burning technology. Often the drivetrains associated with Volkswagen and Audi are extremely pricey, being German imports. The shop rate to repair these vehicles and diagnose them are extremely high. Suspension parts are quite problematic and extremely fragile as well. And on the 2-liter TFSI engine that you find under the hood of many of these vehicles, you can get blown O2 sensors, water pump failures, intake manifolds, gasket leaks, oil coolant system leaks. These engines are extremely problematic. They're slightly underpowered with about 250, 260 horsepower. And if you need to have an Audi, you always have to go to the best engines, the turbo 5s, maybe the 6-cylinder engines. This 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo engine is a problem. Extreme amount of carbon fouling under the hood. And it's the kind of vehicle, just when you had one problem fixed, another one creeps up. So don't let all that flashy German engineering catch up with you. The Quattro all-wheel drive system that gives you great sure-footed all-wheel drive, beautiful LED technology with the Liberace style detailing, the big sunroofs on top, the peeling paint, the electronic gremlins that can stall the vehicle, water ingress that gets in through the doors, the windows, and as well as the hatch. There's way more problems than you can shake a stick up, and the last thing you need is a bad engine. The 2-liter TFSI engine that you find in the Audi A4, the A5, and the Q5, and many other models are just the engine you want to avoid like the plague. Another engine I can't emphasize enough, I tell you each and every time, since about 2008 to about 2014, there's a generation of BMWs that carried a very specific problematic engine. And now, while the latest generation has gone through multiple upgrades, updates on better fueling, cooling, shielding, and of course it's just much more reliable, and the latest and greatest, if you're to buy a 2023, the N63 BMW, which is their twin turbo 4.4 liter V8, isn't quite the same as the worst engine that you can possibly imagine. And the original generation you would find in early models of the X5 like this, still get all the same greatness with the kidney grills. You get the angel eye LEDs. Of course, you do in fact get laser cut rims or alloys, and you get all kinds of details. What you wouldn't have is this decal there. It would actually say xDrive 50i, because the original designation 5.0 on the X5 wasn't necessarily the 4.4 N63. In fact, it had a slightly different engine, but as of 2008, it had the worst engine you could possibly imagine in BMW's history. Because it didn't just begin and end, unfortunately, with the BMW X5, you'd also find it in the F01, F02 series of 750 and 750 Li BMWs. Of course, those are the big, long, luxurious sedans. You could also find it in the old 550i GT. Ever wonder why you don't see many of those around anymore? The 650i from back in 2011 to 2013. I mean, just ask yourself, how many of those models in that year and generation do you actually still see on the road? Little to actually none. I don't see many. The old 550 GT, I was unfortunately about to buy one, and then I did the research many years ago and realized, oh wow, that is a problem. No way I'm running from that. But before I give you the actual designation and the specific engine type, definitely I want to talk about the fact that it was a twin turbo V8. Of course, it put the turbos inside the valley of that V8. It was a 90 degrees, so you stuffed two turbos. And the reason they did that was it was closer to the exhaust ports, so it spooled the turbos quicker, and then conversely it was quicker to the intake, so then it returned the boost much quicker. It meant better throttle response, quicker performance, and more horsepower, less pressure drop in the system. It was a great idea. It just didn't work. And because those turbos were in there, it created all kinds of problems. There wasn't enough shielding, so all that hotness coming off the hot side of those turbos ended up melting plastics, wiring harnesses. Even the engine itself and the valve guides and the seals weren't made of steel, so of course they would melt down, and you'd wind up with excess oil consumption and smoke out the backside. So those first generations had, yes, heavy oil consumption, timing chain issues, which they would rattle and sometimes catastrophically pile up and take out the engine. There was excessive battery draw on that whole car and the whole vehicle. It had a whole host of problems. It just wasn't a great engine. It also had excessive fuel consumption and, believe it or not, some catastrophic engine failures. And after all kinds of customers crying about the problems that they had, there was an initiative by BMW for BMW Care to troubleshoot, diagnose, manage the oil consumption and help customers through it, which I don't know how much help it really was. The only help it would be to take a trade and get rid of it and give a decent trade-in value so you can move on to something better like this. But the worst BMW engine ever that you don't want to avoid, because there's still a few of them out there on the used car market, is the N63 B4400. So it's not like you're going to see a lot of them out there, because they're pretty much all toast with expensive engine rebuilds and repairs and replacements. Not too many left. Most people just gave up the ghost and just got rid of them as soon as they possibly could. But that is literally BMW's worst engine ever, and not one I would wish upon my worst enemy. Right here in front of us, we have a first generation Volvo. As you'll notice right there, we have the famous grille that everybody recognizes. Pretty plain looking detail on there. Alloy wheels. Of course, they got fold-away mirrors and large sunroof on top, because this is the first generation of the Volvo XC60, as we see right there. XC60 Volvo, this is a 3.2 all-wheel drive, and yet since 2017 they've gone and changed this. The first generation was slightly more reliable, although there were problems with the engine. Oil consumption was one of the issues. But now in the second generation, starting in 2017, Volvo came out with the next generation of drivetrains. Gone are these types of engines, and incoming now are a 2-liter turbocharged and supercharged 4-cylinder engine. 4-cylinder engines have no right in being in a mid to large size SUV, in my personal opinion, and they're working way too hard. You can also get in the T8 format. You can get a double electric motor up front, which gives you plug-in hybrid capability. You can get all kinds of mix of technology in the latest XC60, and that's why Consumers Reports ranks them 2 out of 5 in terms of overall reliability. But the drivetrain under the latest generation from 2017 is a major contributing factor. Why is there an issue? Well, first of all, fuel pump issues, fuel leak issues. Of course, drivability of the transmission has been known to be a problem. Technology, electronics, auto stop systems, and lane departure, and all of this tech has been a problem. But the engine is what we're talking about here. And the engine that I'd consider quite unreliable and certainly punching way above its weight class and likely is not all that reliable is what Volvo calls the B420 4T35. And that gives you 316 horsepower and about 300 pound-feet of torque. There's a rear electric motor back there that delivers another additional 86 horsepower as well as 180 pound-feet of torque right there. The only gearbox that's available is the AWTG81SC. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of people complain about problems already, not just with the fueling issues and the technology, but the engine that goes in there, supercharged and turbocharged, that is extremely stressed, and there's a lot of moving parts that are ready to break. Oil consumption excessively is one of the major issues. There have been catastrophic failures, and time again, many customers have complained about having to take their car in and try to follow up as to why this thing's burning so much oil. What's going on? What's with those strange noises? At the end of the day, the Volvo XC60, not all that reliable, and the engine, that turbocharged, supercharged Volvo drivetrain, definitely not one that I'd recommend. With all of that said, you want some reliable luxury vehicles? Right there, because of those engines are so amazing, everybody knows it. You're gonna want to check it out. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.